Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event, UK EduDay, How Microsoft's Free AI Business School Can Support the Employability of Your Students. Today's event is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. If you do not consent to being part of a recorded session, please disconnect your line at this time. The recording will be available at the same location you joined today's event. To learn more about the ways you can participate in today's event, please click on the Messages button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Feel free to let us know if you are ready to get started by typing in a message and selecting Send. We encourage you to interact by using the Messages panel at any time to ask questions regarding content or to request support. We will do our best to answer all of your questions, but due to time constraints, we may be unable to answer them all during the live event. Your feedback is important, so please take a few minutes to complete a survey that will appear at the end of the event. Thank you in advance for your support. If you experience any technical difficulties, refresh your browser by pressing Control F5 or the Refresh Now button on the information panel. If this does not resolve the issue, please send in a message and we will be happy to assist. There is also an online test page if you wish to self-support. Simply click the Help button in the Information tab. And now I'd like to introduce your first presenter, Chester Broad, Marketing and Communications Manager at Microsoft. Chester, you have the floor.
All right, welcome everyone. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us digitally today, especially at such a busy time in the academic year. So I'm Chester and I currently work in events and experiences at Microsoft UK, but I'm actually a recent graduate. So last summer I graduated from the University of Bath, where I studied management with marketing, and perhaps we've got some people from Bath on the call today. As someone who graduated just last year, I feel like I really dodged a bullet. Having left university in June and enjoying my summer and then beginning my graduate role, no questions asked in September. But for most graduates this year who could never have seen any of this coming, that's now quite unlikely to be the case. So COVID-19, as you know, has posed huge challenges for all students, but particularly those who are graduating this year, who are going to face an extremely tough job market when they come out the other side, with many companies freezing graduate hiring or indeed all hiring for the foreseeable future, and many existing offers for graduate roles being reversed and interviews cancelled. That's deeply worrying for both students and universities, as I'm sure you know, who are concerned that this is going to create a sort of lost generation, as some are calling it, with obvious knock-on effects as well on graduates in the years to come. So what can we do about it? Well, at Microsoft, we've been committed to digital skilling for years, ensuring that society has the skills it needs to be future ready for the industries and the jobs of tomorrow. And today we'd like to speak to you about AI Business School, which is a completely free, self-paced online course that we've developed in partnership with INSEAD, which we think could provide today's students with a great digital learning opportunity for personal development, building out their sort of digital CVs and getting an edge when they're applying for jobs. So to give you a sort of a broad overview of what the course involves, so it's non-technical, any student can take it, and it's designed to provide those who take it with a good understanding of, sort of the basic principles of AI technology, but also, equally importantly, sort of how AI can drive value in a range of businesses and organizations, helping people focus on their best work and driving impact and outcomes in the businesses they work for. It requires about 10 hours of study time and it's broken down into 3 key areas. So the first of those is responsible AI, which Richard will be discussing a little bit later in a bit more depth. Focusing on things like developing an ethical framework, dealing with sort of ethically tricky issues such as ensuring AI isn't making unfairly biased decisions, that its decision making is transparent, etc. The second is creating an AI-ready culture, which includes the sort of adoption and change management side of introducing new technology in an organization, and things like cross-departmental collaboration needed to implement AI technology in a useful way, and the sort of data compliance issues as well around the data sharing needed to do that. The third is AI strategy. So this is all about mapping organizational objectives, key operations, resources and capabilities against AI technology, and developing a strategy that marries those two sides together. It's also worth noting that you can digest the course through industry-focused learning paths, and those are manufacturing, retail, healthcare, financial services, government and education, to access sort of industry-specific examples woven throughout the course content. So we're really excited to sort of launch this free course for students, and hope that you'll share it with your students sort of to get them learning about this super relevant topic, especially right now when getting that grad job is going to be that bit tougher, and even so in the sort of next couple of years. As a recent graduate myself, I know I was always looking for these kinds of opportunities as a student, programs backed by brands, which enabled me to kind of personally develop and build out my CV before going job hunting. And I really think this is a valuable opportunity for students in this currently very uncertain environment. So Richard, if you could just pop the slides back on screen when you're ready, and I'll run through the agenda for today. So very shortly, I'll be handing over to Dan Baker, also known as Azure Dan, who will speak about the importance of AI for everyone and why it's relevant for students from all faculties. Following that, Richard Potter will give you an introduction to responsible AI, one of the AI Business School course pillars. And then finally, I'll be back to let you know how you can share the course with your students. There will also be two short Q&As, one following Dan's session and another following Richard's. So do just get on and send your questions in the chat window as the show goes ahead, whenever you like. And Claire and Farrell on the line in the background will help us pick those questions up and put those to us in the Q&A sections. And with that, I'm delighted to hand over to Dan.
It's no secret, the world is changing. This brings with it challenges, but also the opportunities to be able to reimagine tomorrow. It inspires us to look towards technology and fuels transformation, creating an accelerated drive to do things better. But to understand where we are, we need to understand where we've been. And this goes back to the deepest parts of our history. You see, artificial intelligence progresses through the analysis of data. And it turns out, so do we. Now, this may seem like a strange statement, but if we think about it, we have evolved through our ability to be both data collectors and data analyzers. Think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors. How did they survive? How did they evolve? They achieved this because they were able to turn their observations into actionable data. By understanding herd migration, weather patterns, and the benefits of fire, they were able to hunt better, they were able to build better and ultimately live better. The distribution of this knowledge created disruption, and disruption propelled humanity forward. Today, we continue to collect data, and disruption is still our primary drive. But with the volume of data both collected and consumed, it's imperative that we build the tools to be able to better understand, identify, and respond to its potential. Cue the algorithm. Our digital lives are governed by algorithms. When we use social media, when we stream a film, when we plan a trip, even when we do our online weekly shop, algorithms are working behind the scenes to move the process along. Let me give you an example. Now, do you ever wonder why an internet search decides what comes out on top, or maybe how social news feeds choose what information to display? This is what's called link analysis, a kind of data mining, if you will. Algorithms will look at your friends, your mutual friends, your interests and purchase preferences before using this data to customize a feed that's presented back to you. The information you give fuels the information that you receive, and we begin what's known as a feedback loop. This is the power of data and the algorithms that make sense of it. It's also the key components of artificial intelligence. But how does AI learn? Do machines even think? Well, to answer this, we need to consider the question, what is intelligence? For AI, we consider this to be the following 5 attributes: learning, reasoning, problem solving, perception, and language. Let's look at these in more detail. Now, currently, computers learn through supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement-based methods. We'll start with supervised, and as you can probably guess, it means someone looking over the shoulder of the CPU and judging whether the computer is getting things right. It means having a full set of labeled data while training the algorithm. This way of teaching means that each example you present will be tagged with the answer so the machine can learn through association and repetition. It's like teaching your child to read with phonic cards. Now you're probably thinking, but hold on, wait, we don't hold up flashcards to a computer. But the thing is, we kind of do. Think about those apps that can identify objects. This is a car, this is a bike, this is a person. Well, the computer only knows that because somebody has painstakingly gone through the images, telling the computer, this is a car, this is a bike, this is a person. In fact, companies like Samasource are helping thousands of people lift themselves out of poverty in developing countries by paying them to do these annotations and break down complex data projects. By doing so, machines can look at new images and then predict the likeliness of what they're seeing. But what happens when we don't have perfectly labeled data sets or we ask questions that haven't been trained? This type of learning is called unsupervised. With this model, the machine is given the data with no explicit instructions or an example of a desired outcome. It's simply asked to get on with it. The neural network then tries to make sense of it all, desperately trying to find structure to the data and formulate a pattern. Now, unsupervised learning can organize data in many ways. This could be through clustering, i.e. matching colors or shapes or species. Or it could be anomaly detection, whereby it detects unusual patterns. Think about how your bank checks for fraudulent activity or how sometimes your card won't work when you're abroad. This is down to a machine thinking that something is perhaps a little off. Maybe it's association. We've all brought things online and then been prompted with recommendations to consider as we check out. This is because a machine learning model has determined that these recommendations may be of interest by simply matching key attributes. The thing is, by having no absolute truth, it's difficult to measure how effective unsupervised learning will be. But what we do know is that machines are amazing at finding patterns, and thanks to high-powered computing, they can do this at record pace. This brings us to our last example, reinforcement-based learning. Now, as the name suggests, this training is based on two aspects: exploration of what is not known and exploitation of what is. Think of it like playing a video game. How many times have you tried to complete a level only to run into an enemy or some other entity that cuts the game short? Through perseverance and reacting to what has been learned, you'll eventually complete the level. This is the very essence of reinforcement-based learning. This cut-and-dry approach simply works through trial and error. The algorithm evaluates a situation, then acts, receives feedback, and will adjust accordingly to maximize long-term reward. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to technological acceleration, we also have to address fear. And the burning question most people ask is, will AI take our jobs? Historically, change has been met with resistance. Loss of control, excess uncertainty, concerns of competence, and fears of redundancy. But it's also demonstrated that it creates new opportunity. Again, to understand where we are, we need to understand where we've been. Go back a couple of hundred years to the 18th century as Britain began the Industrial Revolution. At the time of change, there was massive uncertainty. Papers printed headlines such as, "The march of the machine makes idle hands." But what we actually see was an explosion in economic growth. We see shifts from agricultural communities to the new urban societies of today. It changed how, when, and where people worked. It inspired innovation. It accelerated production, improved processes all over, all whilst reducing the influences of borders. In short, the revolution made humanity step up its game, and we're enjoying the benefits still today. Think about it, even something as mundane as doing your weekly shop. Can you imagine a time where supermarkets didn't exist? You couldn't just go to one place and purchase everything you needed because nothing was mass produced. In fact, almost everything that we use, consume, wear, and take for granted today is a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution. By embracing the change, we reap the rewards. For many, the evolution of the machines is history repeating itself. The change brings uncertainty, but this time it also brings with it scale, scope, and complexity. We now understand many young children will potentially work in jobs that don't currently exist. amplified by demand from social media, digital publications, and e-commerce. But strip back the fears and we see the potential to enrich life. Today, hospitals use machine learning to help doctors diagnose illnesses more quickly. In fact, artificial intelligence is now more accurate at diagnosing breast cancer from mammograms than its human counterparts. This makes the screening more accurate, it produces better outcomes, and ultimately serves to reduce the stress of the patient. But AI also raises the questions of ethics, with some people asking that just because we can, does that mean we should? And opinions are divided. Like any disruption, people will discuss the pros and cons, the risks and opportunity. But to be successful, we need to ensure that the machines we build reflect our timeless values. And that requires humanity to reflect upon itself. Designing ethical AI to empower others and amplify human ingenuity means that it must be fair. It must also be inclusive, transparent, accountable, and safe. These guiding principles must be firmly rooted in architectural design and mature into systems that foster positive impact. Now, more than ever, we have to collectively think about the society that we want to live in. We need to talk openly and frankly about what the future will look like, and we need to adhere to the principles that will allow us to be considerate of social complexities. We need to avoid discrimination and embrace diversity, because then, and only then, will we be able to build AI that's both fair and just. So where does this leave us? Now, I can't tell you what new jobs will emerge, but what I can say is that historically people have adapted to the new world around them, and I'm confident that it will be exactly the same this time around. We also know that these jobs will be based on technology. Banks will need network engineers, retailers will need web programmers, farmers will need data analysts, and demands for data, AI, and robotic engineers will increase significantly. This means that it's our responsibility to ensure that we train and nurture the workforce of tomorrow. We need to improve the careers advice that's provided. We need to remove stereotypes, and we need to encourage more women into the field. By addressing these gaps, we are future-proofing our commitment to technology adoption, addressing the current skill shortages, and preparing ourselves for the expected demands of the future. So let me wrap this up by talking about some of the ways that AI is improving lives. Today, it's helping organizations and individuals make massive gains on sustainability, tackling some of the toughest environmental challenges. We're using it to gather and share data at lightning speed and help address global health issues. We build products that democratize technology and empower us all to do more. Tools such as the immersive reader that encourages independent reading, comprehension, and accessibility. This helps the 10% of the world's population who suffer with dyslexia improve their reading fluency. Or small businesses who can make use of the tools such as Sketch to Code and simply draw out their web presence. Or further still, improve the interaction with customers through bot technology, creating conversational artificial intelligence through nothing more than uploading an FAQ. We see tools such as the presentation coach in PowerPoint analyze, judge, and enhance our content, evaluating pace, pitch, and filler words before presenting us with points of improvement to consider. We are building tools to help the visually impaired. We're building these tools so they can better see and navigate the world around them with apps such as the Seeing AI tool, which is available to download from the App Store. Technology is being used to preserve culture, language, and history, in addition to bringing priceless architecture to life through mixed reality platforms. Artificial intelligence will empower us all, and Microsoft is collaborating with researchers and academics from around the globe to advance responsible AI practices and technologies. Our guidance aims to ensure that AI is ethically permissible, considerate, and justifiable, as the results will have massive social impact. And we're making huge gains. In the last 5 years alone, our systems have begun matching human parity for vision, speech, reading, and real-time language translation. Jump onto any Microsoft Teams call and you can see how AI can blur the background or filter out unwanted noise. It can perform real-time transcription and enhance collaboration. This is the future that we dreamed of. This is what happens when we embrace technology, and it's a technology that's open to all. At Microsoft, we are driving this initiative with resources such as the AI School, AI Labs, and Microsoft Learn. Together, we learn, we innovate, and we ethically design responsible tools that empower us all to achieve more. This, in turn, enables us to shape the world that we wish to see. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan, for that brilliant introduction to AI. As Chester mentioned earlier, we're now going to head to the floor to answer some questions. If you haven't already, please feel free to post any questions you may have into the chat, as we want to make this session as interactive as possible. So just to get us started, Dan, approximately how many organisations in the UK are already using AI, and how likely are today's graduates to encounter AI in the first few years of their careers?
Well, firstly, thank you. That's a great question. However, a rather difficult one to answer because to an extent, we all use AI. Now, this could be Microsoft Cognitive Services, it could be the AI platform, or it could be simply spinning up Office 365. The fact is, AI is quickly becoming an important part of our lives, whether that's personal or indeed work-related. Today, we know that AI can collect and analyze data faster than any human. We know that it empowers us to become more creative and strategic in our endeavors. We also know that it allows us to focus our time and energy on more meaningful work. But what we must bear in mind is that it's not just a developer tool anymore. If we look at services such as the Microsoft Power Platform, this is now enabling everybody to have the capacity to transform the way they use and consume AI. If we look at industry, AI is being used to improve customer services. It's being used to automate workflows. It's being used to optimize logistics and predict performance and improve advertising. So as graduates transcend into the workforce, they can expect to see this type of integration amplify with the tools that they're using.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dan. Another question then. During the strange and unprecedented times we find ourselves in, do you have any practical examples of how AI has been used as a response to COVID-19?
Right, another difficult. Okay. Well, I mean, given the global scale of the pandemic, again, Microsoft technology is playing a critical role in nearly every aspect of addressing the virus. This could be AI being used to crunch the massive data sets that are being produced, or machine learning models that are helping scientists visualize disease vectors and treatment impacts. With Microsoft, we're collaborating with non-profits, we're collaborating with governments and academic researchers to help build solutions. And we've really broken this down into 5 key areas. Now, some of these you would expect. These are going to be things like insight. It's going to be vectors like treatment, allocation of resources, and accelerated modeling. But AI is also being used to tackle the proliferation of fake news, which is now surfacing the internet. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it all on social media, blaming the 5G networks and, all of these other types of things. And, unfortunately, this is becoming more and more frequent. So again, it's difficult to pinpoint one focus area because the technology has become firmly embedded into all aspects of the work. But if you head over to news.microsoft.com, you can see, almost on a daily basis what we're doing to identify, visualize, and tackle the pandemic.
Brilliant, Dan, thanks. And just thank you for answering those challenging questions so candidly. That's brilliant. So now to pass over to Richard Potter. So Richard is our Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft UK Services, and he's going to give a fantastic overview of Microsoft AI Business School. So Richard, handing over to you now.
Thanks, Daryl. Thanks, Harold. Thanks ever so much. And Dan, what a terrific piece. Really, really interesting content. Hopefully it's given those listening a good overview to what we're talking about here. Microsoft's perspective on this is that clearly we are evangelists for the great power of AI. We believe that great benefit can be derived for society from the technology, and our aim is to try and make sure that as many people are as educated as possible in the subject, and then that means that hopefully they can draw that great value later as we go through. So I'm going to give you two things. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what the course is. In my day job, I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft Services business in the UK, but I'm also a graduate of this course. I have done this course as part of my own development, and I have my own experiences of it as well. I will say straight from the beginning that I did find it an incredibly valuable experience. So let's give you a quick run through of what this course is about. We've configured this course really to try and address the lack of knowledge in the market, and you can see on this slide here this absence of understanding of how AI works holds people back from actually a latent desire that they do really want to do something with this technology. So for students going through education at the moment, giving them the knowledge that will get them over this hurdle will enable them to get into their careers, which will be naturally infused by this technology in all of those great ways that Dan has explained to us. And it will bring all of that technology to fore and mean that we can all be successful with the use of that technology. What the purposes of the technology is really to try and give non-technical leaders a really good grounding in both the principles and the background to the technology itself, but more importantly, how that changes business, how that differentiates the way that organizations work, how it enables organizations to rethink strategy, and how that's played out in these four key areas of strategy, culture, technology, and the responsible use of the technology in work. And we're going to just unpack a little bit more on what those are in a moment. But here really is the sort of the breakdown of the content of this. It's a journey that we take the audience through. We begin by that traditional strategic business school storytelling around strategy, using lots of case studies. There are case studies in each of the sections that we go through, and then we move from the strategic aspects into thinking about the way that you can foster a culture that is conducive to taking advantage of the technology. We then take a little bit of a tangent and look at the particular responsible AI aspects associated with the technology. And these are things associated with trust and ethics and privacy. Really, really key, as I'll unpack for you in a moment later, in order to be successful with it. And then also, really importantly in this, there's a brief introduction to the technology that sits inside this. And this is not to say that this is a course that is geared up towards great technical specialists. This is something that people who are business folk, who have a standard business vocabulary, can get a really good understanding of what that technology looks like. Lots of rich content in this, and that little logo in the corner is interesting as well, because we've worked very closely with INSEAD. We've used INSEAD's great business school credentials to help us present this story in a really constructive way. So within each of the four sections, it follows a similar format. There is a bit of introduction at the beginning from one of the professors at INSEAD. In this case, it's Peter Zemsky, an incredibly articulate and charismatic speaker who gives a little bit of an academic spin on what we're talking about. Then typically there will be a case study introduction. So we'll talk about an example of the subject area. Then there will be a luminary, an executive that will give their leadership perspective on what this particular angle means to them. And then we'll go right back into the case study and look at that through that real sort of action learning experience throughout the program. Lots of great thinkers involved in this. Some that many people will be familiar with. Some from different walks of life, technology companies. Clearly, lots of Microsoft expertise has been brought to bear on this as well. All of these paint a really rich picture. And what's great from having done this course is that kind of diversity of perspective that you get in. Lots of time for you to sort of sit there and reflect and think, well, that's a really interesting angle, a lot to talk about afterwards, things for you as educators also to pick up with the students afterwards as they unpack their own journeys through this experience. And here is just a bit more detail. This slide will be available for you afterwards to have a look at, but this is some of the more detailed content for you to understand what the curriculum looks like in each of the areas. It's very much a modular approach covering these four topics. So all of that feels great and very interesting. But what we thought we would do as part of this webinar is just to bring it to life with you and just unpack one of the courses. And amongst other things within Microsoft, I'm also the responsible AI lead for the UK. So I'm the person in the UK that triages all of our work associated with ethics and trust. Is probably one of the key people in the company that doesn't just determine whether we can do something, but as Dan said, whether we really should be doing things. And you can imagine all of the different potential areas of exploration here. So let me take you through the story as it's presented in this case here, and I'll pull out bits that I think will be particularly interesting for your students. I tend to put this slightly frivolous piece up at the beginning, which sort of hooks into the fact that actually this isn't really going to get deep. It's a slightly tongue-in-cheek slide, because what this is a pressure vessel that's full of computing machinery, something that we affectionately call Project Natick. And this is literally about to be thrown over the side of the ship into the North Atlantic, just in the Pentland Firth off the north coast of Scotland. It's crammed full of computing machinery, and what we're doing is we're exploring how the ocean in this instance might be used to cool our data centers of the future, reducing the environmental impact that we have. All of this is an aside, pointing to the fact that whilst we do this, one of the first things that we would naturally do in Microsoft, because hey, that's how we roll, we stick a camera on the outside of this pressure vessel and we point it at the ocean, and we hook that camera up to a piece of AI that sits in the cloud, and we use that camera to count fish. It makes sense of all of these shimmery, shiny objects. And what this is an example of is an incredibly frivolous, easily accessible piece of AI. What you're seeing in that video is computer vision in action. It's enabling the world of technology to make sense of incredibly complicated, unstructured data. And we tend to see exactly the same technology used in places like this. And in this instance here, this is some work that I've personally been involved with Marks and Spencer's. And it's the same technology that's counting fish at the bottom of our oceans. And this time it's been connected into, very importantly, a business workflow, something that enables a member store staff to come and deal with the mess, and really importantly for a retailer to actually restock the planogram, get the business back going. And it shows a very good, worthy application of this technology. But using this kind of technology in public spaces where clearly not everybody will have openly consented to being monitored, rather passively in this case here, but it does begin to probe questions about the use of this kinds of technology. It's the kinds of technology that even organizations like probation services are thinking about as to whether they can use computer models to determine who the best recipients of scarce resources like educational services, like offender management services, who the best recipients of those services would be. It seems like an incredibly worthy pursuit to say that actually if we've got a very clever AI model, can we use that AI model to make sure that we get the best value for the services that we can provide? And that drift into some of these more complicated applications implications of this technology is the kind of thing that we really talk about in the course. It can be things that are incredibly personal, about how local authorities might execute their responsibilities as custodians of children that are in their care. They're naturally beginning their journey thinking about how some of these incredibly sensitive subjects in our society can be addressed by the use of this technology. And what we want to make sure is that all leaders, whether you're the director of child services in a local authority or you're the chief executive of a big retailer like Marks and Spencer, whether you can confidently approach the application of this kind of technology in your world. So the course unpacks, using, in fact, Microsoft as one of the best case examples here, Microsoft's own approach to how it navigates this responsible AI journey. And it explains that the approach is built in 3 levels. It looks at principles and then how those principles are translated into practice and into tools. And just to give you a little bit more information on some of the details that are shared in the course, the 6 Microsoft Responsible AI principles are laid out and explained and defined, and there's a lot more information on this that's available. But setting up those norms is a very good demonstration for any student absorbing this kind of material about how the importance of basing these ethical decisions on norms and consistent values is going to get them off to a good start in the application of this model. The next section in the course deals with the development of principles, and it looks at those development of principles through 2 elements, through both the development of good governance practices and hierarchies of approval and control, but also, very importantly, thinking about how we can reach out beyond the organization to get external perspectives so that we haven't got a kind of a standard groupthink about the way that we're navigating this kind of technologies. The governance approach talks about 3 different sets of models for navigating through the decision making in this area. And it also talks about some of the artifacts that can be used within that governance system that is established. And then with the external stakeholders, the course provides some useful frameworks for opening up a more public dialogue around the AI technology itself, thinking about things around advocacy and how to extend that perspective to include the right kind of people in these very difficult considerations. And then finally, when we look at tools, what we're looking at are the means within which we can be certain that the practices that we've established that are based on the principles are absolutely executed. And when we talk about tools within the case study that's presented, we're demonstrating some really practical illustrations of standard guidelines and checklists, but then also use case specific guidelines, things that are very pertinent to discrete examples. And then also the tools and the technologies that provide some of the telemetry associated with determining whether the guidelines have been executed correctly. And this is an example of some material from the slide that talks about some of those technical tools that sit in there, things that any student that's entering into the world of work, that's wanting to understand how not just they can actually take advantage of AI, but how they can take advantage of AI in a responsible, enduring way that will deliver impact for them going forwards. There's lots of information here about valuable tool sets and templates and techniques for them to use going forwards. The general tone of the whole of this section of the course is really playing both sides of the great power of AI, but also that great responsibility that comes with that power in order to build that better future, to recognize the great opportunities and advantages, as Dan so very eloquently described at the beginning of this session, to think about how do we approach those great advantages in a responsible way that will mean that they are sustainable for the future. So a slightly breathless canter through it, but I'm hoping that sort of does justice to the animated pace with which the course is delivered. Much more information for you at this website here. So that's aka.ms AI-business-school. If you go there, there's lots of information that gives you all of that background to the course, enabling you to support your students as they enrich their own studies at the moment with some very valuable education around AI Business School. With that, I'm going to just pause and I'm going to let Farrell mediate any questions that we might have received. And I've got Chester and Dan in the background as well, so that we can all contribute to answering those questions.
That's great, Richard. Thank you. That's been very insightful indeed. We have just over 10 minutes now available for questions. So if you haven't already, please feel free to post any into the chat. And Richard and the team, as he just mentioned, will endeavour to answer them all. So Richard, maybe just to get us started, will students need at least some technical knowledge for the AI Business School course for it to be relevant and useful?
I think very little, Farrell. Very a sort of a curiosity rather than an education. I think if you are a problem solver, if you're someone that has got a basic reading around the subject, you will manage your way through the course very, very easily, and also with a lot of kind of curiosity and energy as you go through it. If there are areas where equally you do want to go deeper, there's also lots of additional collateral, lots of links in the course, so that if you are someone of a more technical mindset, there's a lot of signposting in the course to enable you to go and find that information elsewhere.
That's great. And you touched on very briefly there the responsible AI. How relevant is a topic like responsible AI for students looking to maybe start their own business or join a startup after finishing university?
That's a really good question, Farrell, because we're very quickly moving into the world where responsible AI is becoming one of the big differentiators around those companies that are using successfully this technology to deliver their competitive advantage. There are companies that have access to immense horsepower in this space here, but they know that they will not be able to apply that horsepower effectively to deliver that great customer value that they're pursuing unless they can broker that really important relationship of trust with their customers. And responsible AI is your key gateway to establishing that. The other angle, I think, particularly from a sort of a business education point of view, is that it's a very natural bridge from that business, that management conversation that we're used to having in educational establishments, and the technology itself. That ability for us to bridge those customer-related conversations that are heart of our business education with the technology conversations that are at the heart of AI itself.
That's brilliant. So we've just had a question come in, Richard, and it says, would you recommend this course to a computer science student, or do you believe there are more suitable courses available from Microsoft?
I think I would still recommend it, because if you're a computer science person, you're probably not going to get a huge amount from perhaps some of the technological aspects of this course. But the complementary business elements of this course mesh really well into that great computer science perspective that you'll have. So if you're a computer science student looking to think about how you can develop a business conversation around that computer science expertise that you have, this is a terrific course for that, giving you that great business school vocabulary without the necessity of going out and investing in doing a complementary MBA on top of your computer science course.
And just leading on from that, Richard, so as I'm sure you're aware, universities have a very broad range of faculties and course disciplines. Do you believe this course is relevant for students from a range of all disciplines, or just more appropriate for the computer science students?
I'm always going to say it's for everybody. One of the really interesting points that I think Dan brought out in his piece was that the future success of AI will be determined in great parts by our ability to be diverse and inclusive in our involvement in people in this subject. All of these slightly nightmare assumptions that people have of machines doing dysfunctional things in our lives, one of the most powerful mitigators of those bits of dysfunction is diversity and inclusion. The more people from the widest possible background that we can get involved in understanding what AI is at the basic technological level, but more importantly, how it impacts business and our lives within the society that we live, the more successful we will be in taking advantage of the great power that sits in this technology.
That's great, Richard. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to pass over to Claire Reilly, who's going to give a bit more information about the class of 2020 and how AI Business School is feeding into that work. So hi, Claire.
Thank you, Farrell. That's really kind. I just wanted to pick up on something that Richard said, and it reflects a bit on what Dan said too. Just today, I've had 3 universities talking to me about the AI Business School and the role it might play in supporting those students who are finishing their degrees this summer and wondering what to do now because their career path is not as straightforward as it would have been before. And I thought there was a lovely expression one of them came up with, which is that the AI Business School seems to give people who are studying computer science a bit of a business perspective, a business slant, just exactly as Richard said. But that for people who are doing business studies, it helps them with enough of the technology to understand what impact that's going to have on the way that their businesses will run. So I would say that if you or your universities are thinking of how to support students in this really particularly, tricky time, to give them things which are valuable in the longer run, exciting, interesting, could lead them into, further lines of study, which might amplify their CV enormously. I mean, this will give them a badge to sit on their CV, which will mark them apart. It'll be a differentiator when it comes to job searches, etc. And I would say that this is a really good starter course. There are also from Microsoft technical webinars, there are career building webinars, there's a variety of other things which can be offered to students for free, to help them use that time to get their head around where they're going to go and what they're going to do. So if you have a particular problem with the class of 2020, think about this, but also think about the role it would play next year, the year after. This is an amazing curriculum and it will suit students of all different flavors and stages. So think where it might fit into your institution. What I was going to do now, though, after just that one little comment from me, because I was very struck today that already 3 universities have approached me about this, what I was going to do was to hand back to Chester, who's in charge of the campaign for AI Business School, and he'll wrap up the events for today. I just wanted to say thank you all for your participation, and over to you, Chester.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks Dan, Richard and Farrell as well. This has been really great and I hope you've enjoyed it and found it interesting. I know this is a really tough time generally and not to mention a very busy time in the academic year. So it's brilliant to have had you with us today. So finally, how do you get involved? So the first thing you can do is join our skills community on Teams. If you're in higher education or further education in the UK, fill in the form. So there should be a link there on the slide in the middle saying join the skills community. Give that a click and you can come and join the conversation with a number of other universities around the country where we share all sorts of great skills resources, such as the AI Business School, events opportunities, and we keep an active discussion going there. So do hit that link and sign up there and join us. And Farrell or Claire, if you could drop that link in the chat, that would be fantastic so people can click straight through. The next piece is on that Teams community in early to mid-June, so in a couple of weeks' time. We'll be sharing a toolkit of materials you can share with your students and sort of to land the AI Business School with them. It'll include a sort of tailored landing page, an email template, and some social posts, which should give you everything you need to set the context for the course and get your students building their AI skills over the summer and beyond. So join us on the Teams community for the next steps in sharing the course with your students. And lastly, if you could just forward the slide on one, Richard, get in touch with us and let us know how you're rolling out the course. That slide seems to have gone a bit funny. So Claire or Farrell as well, if you could pop particularly Claire's Twitter handle in the chat window. That's probably the best person to come to speak about all things skills and AI Business School. So do drop her a note there if you want to share thoughts about this, or do reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name's Chester Broad, Broad. And our other speakers, Richard and Dan's Twitter handles, will hopefully be winging their way through the chat window to avoid the little slide error there you can see, if you'd like to continue the conversation off the back of today. And with that, really looking forward to hearing from you and seeing you in the Teams community. So I'll just hand back to Sage for one or two final things.
Thank you, Chester, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Please find a link to a certificate of completion in the message panel. As a reminder, you can access the event recording at the same location you joined today's event. Lastly, your feedback is important, so please take a few minutes to let us know how we did by completing a short survey that will appear in your browser window shortly after the stream ends. I'd like to extend a thank you to our presenters. This concludes today's event. You may now disconnect.